Tua must step up if the Dolphins are finally going to beat the Buffalo Bills.
Biggest stories and keys to victory in the Bengals' visit to Arrowhead.
The Seahawks are looking pretty banged up heading into what looks to be another physical showdown.
Marvin Harrison Jr.'s usage in Week 1 against Buffalo is not something to worry about.
The Luke Pickles Wisconsin Badgers beat Alabama this weekend.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Tua must step up if the Dolphins are finally going to beat the Buffalo Bills.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready.
The Miami Dolphins have lost 4 straight times against the Buffalo Bills. 11 out of their last 12 games, the Bills have won. Do you think that the Dolphins are in a position here to get off the schneid and finally get a big win against the Bills?
It all comes down to if they can ever stop Josh Allen. I mean, Allen averages 333 offensive yards per game against the Dolphins in his career. That's most by any player versus any opponent since 1950.
Yikes.
So, yeah, he destroys them. He's also has thrown multiple passing touchdowns in all 13 career games against the Dolphins. That's the longest streak at any point in a player's career versus one team in NFL history. Like Josh Allen owns the Miami Dolphins. So if they want to be able to beat him, they got to stop Josh Allen.
100%, man. That is why I call you the data queen. That is historic dominance from Josh Allen. And our guy, Kyle Krabs at Locked On Dolphins, talked about kind of a hidden matchup in this game as well.
I want to believe, and there's a lot of dynamics about this team that I think Thursday's a winnable game, but y'all have to go out and do it because Buffalo has found all the ways to win all the games, and that includes games that you were leading in the fourth quarter. That includes games that you looked unstoppable in the first half. That includes games where they jumped on you early and just never let off the gas. But he was also asked about Saron Neal and Jordan Poyer and any potential value that they can bring having been in that locker room. And obviously the other side of that is Mike White, who had an interesting, I guess, somewhat conflicting responses to both of those things. As far as what Jordan Poyer and Saron Neal can do to help Tua this week, Tua said they know in the back-end signals what the Bills do and how they communicate things and what they've done to stop us in previous years. And then just kind of the philosophy of that defense with what they try to accomplish against our offense, uniquely different than a lot of teams they would play against. So it could take a lot of the information that I've been given from those guys early in the week and apply it to Thursday.
Okay, listen. A lot of this is going to be about Tua. Tua's got to step up and make plays. He's got to match Josh Allen's greatness. If Josh Allen is great against the Dolphins all the time, then Tua has to match that. But I think deeper than that, the Dolphins have to run the ball on the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are a team that likes to play in nickel. They don't want to play in their base. Miami is a team that wants to run the ball. They use 2 tight ends quite a bit. I think that's going to be a big part of this game. And Joe Marino from Locked On Bills talked about exactly that.
It's all about the front. You've got to win matchups. You have to create disruption. You have to fit the run. You have to get your hands up in throwing lanes. You have to be able to get quick pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. If the Bills are going to have a chance on defense, this defensive line has to eat. Rousseau, Miller, Oliver, Jones, Epinesa, Austin Johnson, everyone's going to have to play great football. And you have matchups that you can win. And so this front being disruptive is monumental, especially because Miami is going to challenge you with, like I mentioned, 2 backs, multiple tight ends. And the Bills are not going to play heavy personnel on defense. They're not going to play 3 linebackers. They're not going to do that. If anything, they're going to play dime. They're going to bring in an extra safety. We know that. We've learned that about this team.
And I mean, it makes sense why they would do that with the speed that the Dolphins have. I think I would rather let the Dolphins have a little bit more room in the ground game than let the Dolphins be able to create explosive plays in the secondary by not having enough speed on the field. But considering that, Michelle, you're 1-0 on the year in your Thursday predictions. What do you think is going to happen in this game, and who do you think comes out on top?
I'm giving it to the Bills because until the Dolphins show that they can stop Allen, and I understand Jordan Poyer might be able to give him some help there on the defense and give him, but like the defense or the offense is different this year with Joe Brady, without Stephon Diggs, without Gabe Davis. So how much does Poyer really know going into this? And then also the fact, the Dolphins can try to run, but Raheem Mostert's out for this game. Devin Achane is questionable with a banged up ankle. So they're going to lean on Jeff Wilson Jr. Maybe the rookie Jalen Wright actually is active this week. So the one game that Tua has beat the Bills in his career was that week 3, 2022 game where it was over 100 degrees that day in Miami. And they always put those away teams on that bench. And they had so much exhaustion on that Bills. Like guys were leaving with cramps and exhaustion. That's not going to happen on Thursday Night Football. The high for the day's 90 is supposed to be down to 80. I'm calling the Bills to win this pretty easily.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, there are reviews on the show, people mad about me not believing in Tua, but at the end of the day, I believe in Josh Allen way more. The history of success is there. Got to go with the Bills in this one. But again, that inner matchup of this game, we focus on the quarterbacks, and rightly so. But that inner matchup of the run game and the personnel battle on offense and defense, how the Bills adjust to the 2 tight end sets of the Dolphins. Are the Dolphins going to be able, because the great equalizer is running the football. If the Dolphins can run the ball with a ton of success, it's going to be too hard to stop play action. It's going to be too hard to stop the passing attack. So I think that is the great equalizer for the Dolphins. But ultimately, I trust Josh Allen, and then the Bills defensive front, like Joe broke down. I trust them to get it done. So I'll go with the Bills.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Biggest stories and keys to victory in the Bengals visit to Arrowhead.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast.
The away team is coming in. So, James, what's the biggest story in Cincinnati this week?
The biggest story in Cincinnati is, can the Bengals somehow, some way avoid a third straight 0-2 start? They started 0-2 in 2022, started 0-2 in 23, and I don't think anyone really had them 0-1 outside of, well, probably no one. Let's be honest here. No one had them losing to the Patriots last week. They lost to the Patriots. Everyone knew when the schedule came out that this was going to be a tough game week 2. And now they're staring and their backs are against the wall of potentially starting 0-2 for a third straight year. So as much as we can talk about Jamar Chase and all the contract stuff that went on, I think that the biggest story is the Bengals record. And then tied with that would be Joe Burrow and what Joe Burrow is, how his wrist is feeling, how he performed week 1, how he will potentially perform week 2. And so, yeah, I think those go hand in hand, of course, wrist and wrist, however you want to say it. But that's what we're talking about here in Cincinnati.
I like the concept. I have to think that the wrist is probably, from us on the other side, we have to enjoy when it's really a question mark. there's always question marks about every team, but when we play so early in the season, having something that's so prescient on everything you can do on offense, especially with some of our questions as well, I think that makes it more and more difficult to really predict predictably, which we're going to try to do later, folks. So hang in here for that. So if that's the offense, what's the defense look like, Jake?
Yeah, we're all wringing hands over Joe Burrow's wrist. Meanwhile, he's telling people that his wrist is fine. It's not stopping him from making any throws. That was a big point he made on Wednesday. And some people remain skeptical. But on the defensive side of the ball, it comes down to tackling. This defense was in position for the better part of the game. They had, I think, the highest pressure rate I saw in week 1 against a very poor offensive line that New England was throwing out there. But they only had 1 sack. They didn't convert those pressures into sacks. Jacoby Brissett instead had 3 scrambles for first downs. And turns out Patrick Mahomes is a little bit better in the pocket than Jacoby Brissett. Not to take anything away from Brissett. I thought he played a really good game in terms of pocket management, but I don't think anyone is comparing him to Mahomes in that category. So there's containing and tackling the quarterback when you get pressure on the one hand, and then on the other, and perhaps more importantly, is force Patrick Mahomes to actually have to do something to beat you. And I know that sounds crazy. It sounds like Roquan Smith going into week 1. But the way the Bengals tackled against the Patriots in the run game, Patrick Mahomes might not have to do anything if they can't tackle the running backs for the Chiefs the way they couldn't tackle Ramondre Stevenson in week 1 with 118 of his 120 rushing yards coming after contact, whether that's bad angles or guys bouncing off of Stevenson. The Bengals' run D was exposed in a way that we didn't expect. We thought it was going to be a problem with the defensive interior. Instead, it was an issue with tackling from linebackers, guys that were in the right place and couldn't make plays, or the same issue with defensive backs. So to me, on the defensive side of the ball, it's the basics. Can they tackle this week?
Well, the thing that sticks out to me is you're going up against Isaiah Pacheco this week when you start talking about tackling, and the way he runs, the way how hard he runs is really going to be a big thing. So from going from trying to tackle Ramondre Stevenson to tackling Isaiah Pacheco, I think is going to be sticking out. James, you had a story, actually. I have to just ask a quick question on this. Do you think Jamar Chase's contract issue is going to play into Cincinnati's season? Or do you think it's a done deal at this point? Obviously, he's probably not going to get paid this year, but do you think it's going to hang over them, as I guess really where I'm going?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And no, I do think it's a big reason. It played a factor in why they lost to the Patriots. Not the only factor. About 50,000 things went wrong. But yeah, I mean, when Joe Burrow finds out that you're playing on that Sunday morning before you play, that was a factor. That was a distraction. I don't think either side is expecting something to come together now. And so I assume Jamar, as much as he can, has moved on and is focusing on the Chiefs. And in this day and age, I feel like that players can move on pretty quickly. Will it come back up? Potentially, but I do think from a football standpoint, he can focus on that and get ready for the Chiefs on Sunday.
I think focus is going to be the biggest challenge for both these teams on both sides of the ball. Not hard to get motivated, right? The motivation is there. It's making sure that you channel that in the right direction, especially when you're overcoming some early season problems, adjustments, that kind of thing. Jake, at the end of the day, do you feel like the distractions that have been going on this week in Cincinnati are enough that they can refocus and be ready for Kansas City?
I think that if there's going to be a game that will coalesce your team's collective focus early in the season, it's playing your number one rival in the AFC over the last few years. If they can't get up and get focused for this game, then I don't know what early season game would achieve that for the Cincinnati Bengals, especially coming off a very disappointing loss. And look, week 1 has not been predictive for the Cincinnati Bengals the last few years, even going back to 2021. There have been early season struggles for this team, whether it's week 1 or week 2. I think I saw a stat that Zach Taylor's 0-5 in week 2 in his career. Maybe that continues this week. Maybe not. We'll see. I mean, they got to play the game on Sunday, right? It was not an inspiring effort, though, in week 1. If you don't see a bounce back this week, then those doubts just grow louder for the Bengals in Cincinnati. I can't imagine that focus will be an issue, though, going into this game, despite some of the things going on around the team. A bigger issue will be who's actually healthy for these teams, as T. Higgins remains on the rehab field, not practicing. Will be perhaps a little bit of a surprise if he gets back into the swing of things in time to play in this game. The Bengals had a number of other players who weren't practicing on Wednesday. We haven't seen the full injury report yet to know what those designations are as of the time of recording, but those will be questions the Bengals have to answer this week, I hope, more than questions about focus and whether or not they're ready to play football on Sunday against this opponent after what happened to them in week 1.
So just to be clear, you don't think T. Higgins does play this week?
I'd be surprised right now. James, would you agree with that?
Yeah, he didn't practice on Wednesday, and the vibes I got last week were that he would probably be out for a little bit. So, no, I don't anticipate it. Okay. Could it change? Maybe, but I would be surprised if we see him out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just was curious because you guys know a lot more than we do when it comes to the Cincinnati players. That's what we're here for. So thank you very much.
The Seahawks are looking pretty banged up heading into what looks to be another physical showdown.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast.
Even though it's only week 2, this looked like an injury report that you would see in like week 12 or week 13. 7 players that were limited today, 4 players that were out. And unfortunately, we already know one of them that will not be playing in New England. Mike McDonald already declaring Uchenna Nwosu out for this weekend. So we won't be on Nwosu watch for the rest of the week. But this is a team that's pretty darn banged up coming out of that game against the Broncos. And New England is a physical football team as well. Maybe this is just being cautious early in the week to make sure they have all their ducks in a row so they can be ready for this game on the road against the 1-0 Patriots.
Yeah, you hope so. Fingers crossed from a Seahawk perspective here. You know, as far as the players who did not participate today, that's going to be the star running back, Kenneth Walker, the tackle, George Fant, who we know went down with a knee injury in the week 1 victory over the Denver Broncos. You mentioned Uchenna Nwosu, who's already out, but Tyrell Dodson as well, the inside linebacker position. Those are players that did not participate in practice at all on Wednesday. Mike McDonald also said in his press conference that the Seahawks are going to be traveling on Friday, so to not be on the practice field on Wednesday is significant. Limited participation. That would be Tyler Lockett, the tight ends, Noah Fant, as well as Pharaoh Brown. Still, it's probably positive news that he was at least a limited participant. You know, Pharaoh Brown wants to, exact a little bit of revenge on his former New England Patriot teammates, but another veteran linebacker in Jerome Baker. So again, that's going to be one of the real interesting things here the Seahawks have to face, as well as Draymond Jones and the cornerbacks Reek Woolen and Trey Brown. So as you said, Corbin, this is a long injury list. I think that it's a reflection of 2 things. As you said, it was a physical game against the Denver Broncos. This is the highly physical squad that they are going to be facing in the New England Patriots, the 1-0 New England Patriots. And of course, it's a big, long travel all the way to Foxborough. I think all of those things are factors here. I do expect to see Seattle be relatively healthy, relatively ready to play, similar to what we saw with Tyler Lockett, who of course didn't practice a lot and then wound up getting the game ball as the closer for the Seahawks in their victory. But still, there are a number of injuries that bear watching as we get a little bit closer to the game against the Patriots.
So I'm going to play the glass half full card for this injury report because most of the players that are listed here, we already knew that they have been dealing with minor injuries. Noah Fant, the toe issue, might be something he's dealing with for a little while. He's missed most of training camp. He did play the entire game last week. They're going to be continuing to protect players like that. Draymond Jones, Tyler Lockett, the hamstring and thigh injuries, those don't just magically disappear. They can be good enough that you can play on game day, but these are guys that they are going to continue to err on the side of caution with. And even Reek Woolen, who played every single snap the other day against the Denver Broncos, if he's got even the slightest tightness in his hamstring on Wednesday, then they're going to make sure that he's ready to go. I would not be surprised if a number of these players are full participants in Thursday's practice. The guys like Draymond Jones and Noah Fant, who have been limited up to this point in practice, maybe the Seahawks are fine with that setup moving forward, at least for right now. Hey, we'll get you what reps you need in the individual work. We'll have limitations on team drills, but we'll make sure that you're ready to go. These are veterans that have played a lot of football. So those are players that you can afford to take away some of those practice reps and still think that they're going to be ready once you get to Sunday in Foxborough. But still, it's understandable at this stage of the season, only one game in, to have this long of an injury report. You can understand why fans be concerned. The one that I am a little bit concerned about, that it was made this quickly, the fact that Uchenna Nwosu, they're already saying, is not playing, that means to me he's not close to being ready. Because if he was close to being ready, I think they would be testing out the next few days. Hey, is he going to have a chance to at least maybe get on the practice field? Who knows if he plays this weekend? But the fact that they are already saying, no, he is not going to play, and maybe some of it's the road trip, they might just think it's not a good week to bring him back when they're going cross country. Who knows what's playing into that? But that suggests to me that at the very earliest, week 3, that might not even be necessarily the most optimistic timetable right now if they're already this early in the week, in week 2, ruling him out.
That's a really good point. And that's obviously the concern for the Seahawks and for Seahawks fans everywhere. I also think that some of it is, and I hate to mention the San Francisco 49ers, but, their head coach, suggested that Christian McCaffrey would have, their star running back, Christian McCaffrey, would have been available if it was a playoff game. And instead, they went with the former undrafted free agent Jordan Mason because they recognized it was week 1. And obviously, the 49ers were able to, have that victory against the Green Bay Packers without New York Jets. Sorry, I get my Aaron Rodgers references here mixed up, but without Christian McCaffrey. I think the Seahawks are feeling confident in what they have in Boye Mafe and Derek Hall. And that's one of the reasons why maybe they are exercising extra caution with Uchenna Nwosu. Look, there's no question about it. Uchenna Nwosu is Seattle's best edge defender against the run. You would love to have him in a game like this where the Patriots ran the ball almost twice as many times as they threw the ball, rushed for 170 yards, only threw for 121 yards in their victory against the Cincinnati Bengals a week ago. Uchenna Nwosu is a terrific football player. You want him back as soon as possible. But when he is back, you want him full strength. So I do think that this is something where Seattle is exercising a little bit of caution. I do expect Uchenna Nwosu to have a strong possibility of playing in week 3. But yes, there's no doubt about the fact that Mike McDonald just said right off the bat, Uchenna Nwosu is not yet ready to return to the field. It is definitely a little bit of a reason for concern for the Seahawks.
I do like the point that you just made there, that the depth that the Seahawks now have at that edge rushing position with the way that Boye Mafe and Derek Hall played, the fact that Draymond Jones, look, I know he was limited, but he's going to be ready to go on Sunday. And Travis Gibson is going to be another week into his journey learning all this playbook. And remember, he's only been here for a couple of weeks, so he might be able to give you some more snaps in this game against the Patriots if you ask for that. So, and by the way, Tyus Bowser's now been in the practice squad a couple of weeks. He might be a practice squad elevation candidate this week to reunite with Mike McDonald. There are options for them. So why in week 2 rush Uchenna Nwosu back from a sprained knee if he's at 85%? Get him back fully healthy here in the next week or 2. Don't rush him back. If they had just gotten beat by the Broncos and their edge rushers struggled, or they got ran all over because they couldn't set the edge, then I think you might have a much different situation on your hands. Mike McDonald might be saying, look, I need Uchenna Nwosu back now. Did you see what happened without him? But that is not what played out in week 1, at least. And so the Seahawks have confidence in the group of players that they have can fill in for him. So that is a good point. I do still, at the same time, I think we can both say that, yeah, they may be playing it cautious, but also the fact that they're moving this quickly to say he's out, that would suggest to me that he's just not quite where he needs to be at to even be in consideration to play this weekend, which that might be a little further along in the timeline than a lot of Seahawks fans would have. Nonetheless, an injury report that I would not get too worried about if I'm a Seahawks fan. Look, it's lengthy, but there's a lot of guys in here that were limited. They could very easily be full practice tomorrow. A lot of guys that have been dealing with a few bumps and bruises already along the way, and you're just trying to take care of your players on Wednesday. So tomorrow, that'll be a more telling injury report. If all these guys are still on there, then you start to maybe have some reservations. How physically healthy is this team going to be heading into the road opener? But I would not be hitting the panic button just yet, especially because the Seahawks are going to take care of their players with a physical opponent coming up.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast.
What a day from Bowden Francis, my man, eh?
This guy just continues to go out and be a dog. He clearly wants to be a starting pitcher in the rotation for the full season in 2025. This guy that's kind of been thrown all over the place. Okay, came out for relief opportunities in 2023. Again, has been in AAA, has started for the Blue Jays, has come in for long relief, has come in some higher leverage situations. Really a guy that's done it all. So it's a guy that I have been very high on. Again, I know a little bit about Toronto Blue Jays baseball, but I also have my fair share of takes that have not panned out very well. My Kevin Gausman being top 10 in Cy Young voting. Not quite there, Carter first. But anyway, back to the man of the hour. This guy, like Chris Bassett said earlier on in the season, he has the makings that can become an ace for your Toronto Blue Jays. And just looking at his stat line today, 8 innings pitched, no hits given up throughout those 8 innings until the 9th inning. The kind of the same outcome, unfortunately, as the Los Angeles Angels start. 8 innings of no hits, an unbelievable start. A little bit less pitches thrown in this. Had a very good 8th inning. Bowden Francis only throwing 6 pitches in that inning. But the home run leading off the 9th inning, Taylor Ward being the Los Angeles Angels. This one being Francisco Lindor. So we're going to get into the Bowden Francis, the game, more so the game stuff, obviously in the second segment. I just wanted to start off with how good Bowden Francis has been. So there's one major switch, if you've been watching Toronto Blue Jays baseball, that Bowden Francis has made. Hasn't just been a light switch, but it's been a work in progress, and he's really seen it come through fruition here in the back half of the season, and that's him adding his splitter. Bowden Francis used to be just the curveball, slider, fastball guy. This fastball was starting to get hit around a little bit. People were starting to sit on it as one of those harder pitches. Nothing to really play off that fastball. Decided to start working on a splitter thanks to Chris Bassett using his splitter grip. And boy, is this working out very well for Bowden Francis. So his last 7 starts has really been when he's starting to been throwing this splitter that I've been talking about here. And the numbers clearly show that it's been working out. But before I get into those numbers, I just want to just go over the inconsistent season of Bowden Francis. Because April 1st, guy goes out, and on the day of April 1st, this guy's ERA is 11.81. Had so many blow-up starts in a row. Like his first couple starts, 7 earned runs given up, 5 earned runs, then 2 earned runs. So this is where the season started for Bowden Francis, and I just want to just kind of put emphasis on how big of a turnaround this was for Bowden Francis over his last 7 appearances. So Bowden Francis, 4-1 over those starts. That's not really what I'm looking at. 1.5 ERA, 48 innings pitched, 16 hits given up. 8 earned runs only, 46 strikeouts, and the 5 walks. 5 walks is a huge thing for Bowden Francis. Used to be a command issue, and only has 0.44 whip. So I compared Bowden Francis to a lot of these other pitchers, but we'll get into that after I kind of give you a chance to just say how good Bowden Francis has been. These are the numbers of an ace on a starting baseball team. Bowden Francis, over these last 7 starts, has easily been the Toronto Blue Jays' best pitcher over these last 7. We'll get into some more stats to back that up after. But Bowden Francis, Braden, what are you seeing out there that's getting you fired up about him?
Man, he's been so good. I mean, you talked about the splitter, and that's the huge key piece for this. And it can't be overlooked. It can't be talked about enough. Him adding this pitch has given his pitching style such depth. And it's obviously working. And I think the only piece that I have to say is be cautious as Bowden Francis. You want to take in all the the glory that comes with being a great starting pitcher. But teams will start to figure out that splitter. And it's new. It's a new pitch. Teams are going to make adjustments, right? We talked about this with Davis Schneider and his sort of great start, and then his, he sort of came back down to earth. And that's because teams figured him out, and teams will start doing that on Bowden Francis. Pray to God they don't. But it is going to happen. So great for Bowden Francis as of right now. An absolutely electric guy. But again, right, when the league starts to figure him out, the big question is, probably next season, will we see him adjust from what the league is throwing at him? And I think that is going to be the biggest question for Bowden Francis sort of moving forward.
That's, again, you look at a guy that doesn't have the most service time of all time, just added a new pitch. Obviously, the MLB takes time to adjust. You look at the Davis Schneider Insanity run. You look at a lot of these runs early on in a lot of players' careers, especially with pitchers. When you get tape on pitchers, it is a lot easier to form an attack strategy that you can implement throughout the entire lineup. So that's going to be a Bowden Francis challenge, probably not necessarily for the rest of this season, but for 2025 and just for his future. A guy that hasn't necessarily been consistent enough to be a full-on starting pitcher for any MLB team, as we've seen so far through Bowden Francis' career, not really finding his footing with the Toronto Blue Jays. But this is a huge building piece to put off of. And the stuff shows, right? The stuff it speaks for itself. Bowden Francis splitter isn't going to get any worse over time, knock on wood. Hopefully you don't anticipate a downfall, but he's 27 years old. The stuff, again, speaks for itself. The slider is moving like crazy. The curveball mixed in well. If he's having his pitches mixed in well with good command, it's going to lead to good results. It doesn't matter if players know specifically that these pitches are coming. If they are executed effectively enough, it's not really going to matter. You look at Kevin Gausman when he has that fastball and splitter on command. It doesn't matter if you know he's going to throw the splitter in an 0-2 count. It's so hard to lay off him because it looks so good for so long. If Bowden Francis can continue to keep hitters off balance and on their toes, taking wild swings, as we kind of use the MLB term, swinging the garden hose out there, had a lot of those swings in this last start against the New York Mets. But again, you look at the future, you need your starting pitching to be consistent for longer than just 7 starts. This has been a great 7-game stretch. And it's proven a lot to a lot of Toronto Blue Jays fans that he should at least be in the question for the starting pitching role. And you're looking into 2025, I think you'd be absolutely crazy if you don't have Bowden Francis right now in that starting pitching rotation. But there's kind of a separate argument that I wanted to get into. So you look at Bowden Francis, and again, you don't necessarily have the career accolades. You don't have that 7 years of pedigree, 10 years, whatever it is, of consistency from Bowden Francis. But you look at how this guy's been carrying himself, and you look at how he's pitched over the season. So his season stats are he has a 3.5 ERA, 92.2 innings pitched, 82 strikeouts, a .93 whip. This ERA is the best out of all pitchers on the Toronto Blue Jays. Like, you look at it over a season-long period of time. Again, these sample sizes are a little bit smaller because Bowden Francis hasn't been starting over this full time. This guy is putting up numbers as good as some of the veterans that we have said multiple times that we're not necessarily worried about going into next season. And you look at a lot of these stats over these 7 games. Again, this is a little bit of an unfair comparison because Bowden Francis is playing the best baseball of his life, you could say. And you can't necessarily say the same things about Kevin Gausman, Chris Bassett, and Jose Barrios. But you look at these stats, ERA, innings pitched, strikeouts is, I think, the only one he was second on over the last 7 games. I think Chris Bassett's got to beat on that one. Walks, earned runs, all these important stats. Bowden Francis has been the best pitcher over the last month on the Toronto Blue Jays. You look at the August pitcher of the month. The biggest question is consistency. Right now, you have a playoff series tomorrow. I might have Bowden Francis over some of the likes of Jose Barrios, Kevin Gausman, and Chris Bassett. But that's not reality. That's not where we are in Toronto Blue Jays baseball. If this guy can prove a little bit of consistency, continues to pitch effectively throughout spring training, I think you got to have this guy at minimum as your 4th starting rotation guy, and maybe can work his way up, maybe to see a playoff appearance for the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays.
And that's what you got to hope for, right? It's just building upon the stuff coming out of this year. And we talk about this all the time. It's finding your game in the last little bit of this season to be able to carry over into 2025 with confidence. Confidence for baseball players, as we always talk about, is one of the biggest components to their game. And Bowden Francis looks like he's going to be carrying over a lot of confidence.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Marvin Harrison Jr.'s usage in Week 1 against Buffalo is not something to worry about.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast.
The biggest story that I want to discuss today, after just seeing just regurgitation of pretty much one side of an argument, is that the Cardinals have failed Marvin Harrison Jr. and that if you buy a Maserati, why would you leave it in the garage? What are we doing here, guys? These are the facts, okay? Marvin Harrison Jr. did not play he played 3 snaps in the preseason, but he played 1 passing down snap and didn't get a target, didn't have any sort of juice in the preseason, okay? Worked out with Kyler Murray all offseason, and this was his first NFL game as one of the most highly touted wide receivers coming out of college that we've seen in the last handful of years. On the road, against a perennial AFC championship game team, in an offense where he's the third option, in an offense that's run first. Let me wind that back really quickly. Third option in a run-first offense in his first NFL game. Now, of course, he won't be the third option forever, but behind James Conner and Trey McBride, who have been NFL players for more than 1 kickoff to start a game. Him getting a handful of targets, 1 reception, 4 yards. Lest we forget, he dropped his first target. Okay, that's not a knock on the kid. It's just to say this is his first NFL game. He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. The Cardinals put up 28 points, 21 on offense without him. And I said this entire offseason, as a way to kind of massage people into what we're going to see, which is what we saw Week 1, it's most likely going to be a slow start. It's most likely going to be James Conner and Trey McBride first. And he's going to eat at some point, in the first handful of weeks. This offense would be fine without Marvin Harrison Jr. The fact that they drafted him is going to take it to the next level, you'd think. This is the first time the starters have played like, oh my God, why would you draft Marvin Harrison Jr. number 4 overall if you're not going to throw him you don't have to. In Week 1, the trust on an NFL field is not there yet between Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. Just due to happenstance that this was Marvin Harrison Jr.'s first game in the NFL. He trusts Greg Dortch, he trusts Trey McBride, and he trusts the run game. And while Drew Petzing's play calling may have been suspect at times, especially in the second half, when Kyler Murray wasn't taking many shots down the field, 2 of the 3 times that Kyler Murray did take a shot down the field, the wide receivers dropped the ball. So I'm seeing a lot of Kyler Murray missed Marvin Harrison Jr. And, they're not looking his way. Kyler Murray only does 1 read. They rely on the run too much. Relax. This isn't Madden, okay? It's not just, this is a good player. Put him on, X, go route, hot route, red 7, hot route, touchdown. That's not how this works. This is real life. So I can't comprehend, while it's not the outing you wanted him to have during his first game as an NFL player, it's far and away, it couldn't be further away from a big deal. The constant overreaction to any time Kyler Murray steps out of bounds, proverbially, one way or another, or the way one little thing goes wrong on offense. It's like, oh, told you this wasn't going to work. Relax. Please. This is the first time the starters have played a game since week 18 of last season. And if you look around the NFL and you look at, I think Jared Goff led the NFL in passing with 217 yards last week. Relax. We've never seen more of a bona fide, true preseason game that counts than we did in week 1. Everybody looked bad. So when you look at Marvin Harrison Jr. and the wide open play, on the broken play, Kyler Murray already had a broken pocket and he was already looking to the other side of the field. This wasn't like, and he would have gotten sacked if he didn't get rid of the ball. This isn't like, he looked down to Hike, oh, Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide open. Nope, I'm going to look the other way. Too easy. We'd rather start with an L. Oh, I'm so small, I can't see over the line of scrimmage. All of these things are so ridiculous at this point. Kyler Murray had one of the best quarterback performances we saw in week 1. But we're at a point now where this is almost becoming like a political thing. It's like, oh, it's one side or the other. It can't be both. It can't be. Kyler Murray was not the reason the Cardinals lost. The defense was. Maybe some questionable play calling. But the whole Marvin Harrison Jr., you must feed him so many times right away, or this isn't. Why? This is not a video game. This is going to take time. I don't understand why it's, fail. Fire everybody. Everybody needs to chill. They went toe-to-toe against a perennial 10-12 winning team, 10-12 game winning team. After a season of winning only 4 games, having to rebuild the roster. And that was their first shot. If they would have lost by 30 and Marvin Harrison Jr. had 1 catch, yeah, we'd be having a different conversation right now. But the constant pushback of, if you buy a Maserati, why are you putting it in the garage? Relax. It takes more time than just the snap of a fingers. I'm assuming next week it'll be a lot better than what we saw in week 1.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Can Luke Fickell's Wisconsin Badgers beat Alabama this weekend?
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference.
Alabama is coming to Camp Randall to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. It's a big game for the Badgers and Luke Fickell's program overall. It's a true measuring stick to see where the Badgers program is right now, early in year 2 for Fickell, and maybe show them just how far they still need to go to get to that upper level of college football. But the first question is, can the Badgers win this game? What do you think? I mean, it would take quite an effort to do so, and Wisconsin would need a big push from a home crowd atmosphere, which they'll have. I'm sure that place will be rocking out there at Camp Randall. We'll X and O this thing a little bit in a minute, but let's also acknowledge the fact that we don't get games like this very often. This is just the third time ever between these two schools. Wisconsin won the first meeting 15-0 in 1928. Both schools opened the 2015 season together more recently. I was in Arlington at Jerry's World down there in Texas. Tide won that game 35-17. This meeting will take place in front of a national TV audience at noon on Fox. Both teams come into this game with 2-0 records. Now, the big news here for the Badgers was, they were going to have a quarterback this year. Everybody was all excited about Miami transfer Tyler Van Dyke, and he's been leading the offense thus far. Now, you everydayers on this podcast, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of Van Dyke. He's a talented kid, but he's way too inconsistent. I live in the state of Florida. I saw him at Miami. All right. It's up and down, up and down. And he's not been exactly lighting the offense on fire for the Badgers in the first 2 games against Western Michigan and South Dakota. In 2 games so far, he's completed just 60% of his passes, and he's just got 1 touchdown pass. That's it. For the record, we're Braden Locke fans here on the depth chart for the Badgers. Just throwing that out there in case you're new to the podcast. But if you're a regular, you know. The running game, Ches Malusi, coming back from that horrible injury last year. He hasn't been awesome. Not bad, but not awesome. Got 134 yards in 2 games with 3 touchdowns. And it just seems like Wisconsin's not as physical as it has been in the past. This might be a big problem against a team like Alabama, if you ask me. But there's a school of thought here, all right? Maybe a little ray of hope, a little silver lining, if you will, that Wisconsin's been holding things close to the vest a little bit, doing just enough to win against these lesser schools and not putting a lot of film out there for Alabama to watch. The Crimson Tide may get the real Wisconsin Badgers that nobody's seen yet. That would be great if that's true. I don't know if it is or not. I don't know. That'd be awesome. Alabama, they beat Western Kentucky easily in its opener, and it took everything they had last week, though, to beat South Florida. So they were figuring out some things, too. And by the way, that's 2 years in a row South Florida's given them a game. Now, you might be saying, hold on, wait a minute. The Alabama-South Florida game, Craig, that was 42-16? Yeah, that's true. But it was a 14-13 ball game in the fourth quarter. And then the dam broke, and, South Florida couldn't hang with Alabama at that point. Plus, I got to tell you, Bama was pretty sloppy. They've got some stuff to clean up. They're looking at this Wisconsin game as a get right game. They gotta get things right, or they're not going to get a win in here. They know that in Camp Randall. They lost 3 fumbles, and they posted 13 penalties. That's not Alabama football. No, it is not. In fact, I know after watching a lot of football that if a Nick Saban coached Bama team lost 3 fumbles and had 13 penalties, first of all, that would never happen. But if it did, hypothetically, they would be darn near perfect the next week because they would be grinding it out in practice. That would not be a fun week of practice. You can be sure of it. So we'll see if the new coach, Kalen DeBoer, who took over for Saban when he retired, has the same effect, cleaning things up week to week. Now, the Badgers defense is going to have to contend with Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe, who last year arguably was the most improved quarterback from the beginning of the college football season to the end of the college football season. He wasn't very good at the beginning, but by the end, you all saw him, took Michigan to overtime in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff last year. He's off to a good start this year. He's yet to throw an interception. Plus, he's a great runner and a dual threat quarterback that has to be contended with. His favorite threat is Ryan Williams downfield, 6 catches for 207 yards and 3 touchdowns already this year. Wisconsin's going to have to make sure they know where he is at all times. And maybe that guy will be Ricardo Holman. Of course, he led the Badgers last year with 7 interceptions. Hasn't gotten one yet this year, so he's due. Maybe in a big game like this, Holman could come up with a pick or 2 and make a difference in this game. It's a great time to start getting your first interception of the year, I'll tell you that. Also adding, though, to the challenges for the Badgers on defense, senior linebacker Jake Chaney, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. He's going to miss the first half because of those quirky targeting rules. So here's the deal. He's partially suspended for the first half of this game because he had a targeting call in the win against South Dakota. If you get a second half penalty, you got to sit out the first half of your next game when you get tossed from that one. Unusual play, too. He hit with the crown of his helmet, which you can't do, but he hit the opposing player in the stomach, not the head. Right in the soft part of the stomach with the helmet. You don't see that called very often. But that was called on him. So anyway, that'll be a deficit for the Badgers defense starting this game on Saturday. So in the end, I think the Badgers, they can win this game. Absolutely they can. You're going to have to do some work, and they might need a little home luck from the crowd at Camp Randall. So, and man, I'll tell you, I have never been to Camp Randall. It's on the bucket list of places to go. That place always looks like it's hopping. You Badger fans who are watching, man, those home football games are spectacular. So with Alabama coming in here, national television audience, I'm expecting a big raucous environment, very similar to what we saw last weekend when Nebraska hosted Colorado for the night game on NBC. That place was electric. I expect every bit of the same atmosphere, even though it's earlier in the day, at noon there at Camp Randall for this football game. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's one of the biggest games on the schedule for the day. And obviously, we're wishing the Badgers luck because we got a Big Ten anti-SEC thing going here. And the SEC already got us on the Michigan game last week with Texas. So we'll see what Wisconsin could do against Alabama in this one.